Thank you very much, and thank you, Minister Radman, for inviting me to this excellent forum and to share the floor with all of you and to hear all these interesting speeches. Usually I'm in an AFET committee, Foreign Affairs Committee, and we are listening to each other from the other side and often criticizing High Representative for something that could or should be done, but really seeing how the things and the different opinions and the desires are presented for us is much easier than to understand High Representative. And I would like to congratulate you for this morning's speech, as you really reflected the situation, how it is, the state of play, and what in the future it will be. I'm also IPA co-rapporteur, and I'm happy to say that these 40 billion euros that will help save the Western Balkan from third actors, we have finally finalized the deal together with the Council and the Commission, and hopefully in September this should be voted, and it was voted in an AFET session, and it should be voted in a plenary session. So this money will be operated for the transformative process of the Western Balkan and to get out of this quarantine. I'm going to tell you the personal story, how I see the coming out of this quarantine, as I was during the COVID, passing this COVID pandemic in Split, where I live. My family, my mother was on the other side of the border in Mostar, as I'm originally from Mostar. It was tragic to see that vaccines and that all these products that we are happy to finance the research and innovation, and it was the final discovery was done by Turkish migrant, and that's also some tragic story, and what we are going to see in the future, like Nikola Tesla's day. Nikola Tesla went to America to become a player. And he was born in Croatia. So what happened? This vaccine was not available neither to Bosnia and Herzegovina and to Western Balkan. They were being left behind because the European Union did not want to include them into the first purchasing agreement. And what happened? We had China, we had Russia, we had Putin, we had all these actors, even Erdogan, playing a big guy here. And nowhere is a better opportunity to see what is the real stake of strategic autonomy for European Union than here in Dubrovnik. I mean, luckily, we are having Pelješac Bridge being concretized and built, hopefully next year, that will connect Croatian territory. But this territory was isolated during the war. And these people have suffered greatly, and we often forget that this beauty was exposed to the bombardment, was exposed and was left alone without anyone during the fall of former Yugoslavia. So when we are talking on the future, when we are talking about how to transform, we have to take into account also the personal stories of the peoples, of the cities, and how to rebuild this future. And we have to face the reality. I was waiting for President Rakovsky at the airport in Mostar when he crashed in this terrible accident. And this Ohrid agreement was a basis of a peace in Northern Macedonia, as it is today. This fine balance. We are having this Serbian-Kosovo dialogue being at stake and being a real issue, like an electoral law issue in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And that's also fine balance how these countries will find their third way in between the extremes. Because fall of Yugoslavia was not so many years ago, but no one has learned the lessons. And why we are still having these countries in quarantine? Because international community has not really learned the lessons. Where did we go wrong in this process in the last 30 years? So what we are having at stake in certain countries, I mean, I lived in Spain, and High Representative well knows how Spain finds its balance, because you can never abolish Catalan identity, but you can find a fine balance between the identities in Spain, like in Italy, where I was also a diplomat, where they found the balance with the South Tyrol issue. So in Western Balkan, first we have to deal with unresolved issues, and then we can fully implement this transformative process with the money that we agreed. Otherwise, this will be only pouring all these 14 billion euros into building roads by which the human capacity will be lost forever. Thank you very much, and I hope that my assessment was not as shocking, but as usually I am, and I have this privilege to be a politician, not a diplomat anymore. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we'll move to Mr. Miroslav Lajčák, the EU Special Representative. Mr. Lajčák, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be back in Dubrovnik as someone who has been coming here to Dubrovnik Forum since 2008. I'm glad that we are back on track, and this has always been a very good platform to discuss EU-Western Balkan relations as we are doing right now. And I also have to say that I've been at several panels, also with some of today's panelists in the last weeks, discussing exactly the EU-Western Balkan relationship, which for me is a good sign, confirming the increased interest of the European Union towards this region, which has not been necessarily the case most recently. Let me start with reminding ourselves of some basic facts. First of all, the Western Balkans are surrounded by the European Union member states, and this is not going to change. And since this is not going to change, then European Union will continue being very engaged in the region. We are engaged because it is in our interest to have an immediate neighborhood that shares our norms and our values. And we are doing this, of course, in many different ways. One way to do so is to offer a huge amounts of financial and structural support. That means to prepare the region for membership, but also to support its economic and social development. The European Union's solidarity towards the region and the citizens of the region is and continues to be unmatched. Sometimes it looks invisible, but it's probably our problem. But the fact is that no other offer is close to what the European Union is offering. European Union is by far the biggest investor, biggest donor, biggest trade partner of the region. And for example, last year, 68% of region's trade was with the European Union, 60% of investments came from the European Union. Economic and investment plan was already mentioned here. The Commission put forward 9 billion of grant fundings in the areas which match EU's priorities. That means we are preparing the Western Balkans in similarity with what we are doing for our member states. Connectivity of transport, energy, digital, green transition. And this is complemented by a guarantee facility that can raise investment up to 20 billion euro. European Union's message is very clear. The EU is offering best possible conditions for major investments, and this serves two purposes. One, to boost the economic recovery of our partners, and the second, to make sure that they do not end up in a trap of unfavorable loans from third countries. And I think Minister Radulovic can say something about this. And of course, in parallel, we are supporting the region in removing internal barriers for business within the Western Balkan region. And here, again, I want to mention the common regional market, which is, again, based on EU rules and standards. And it has an enormous potential. And of course, this brings me to a logical question, namely, how come this huge presence, huge attention, huge assistance has not translated into membership of the region in the European Union, or at least a substantively greater progress? Because it's a sad fact that since Thessaloniki summit in 2003, only one country of the region has joined the European Union, our host country, and out of remaining 6, 4 have not even started accession negotiations, and that's certainly not what was envisaged back in Thessaloniki. So I can offer you my honest answer to this. Namely, of course, we have been faced with many challenges. Over the last 10 years, let me remind you, we have been dealing with the financial crisis, with the migration crisis, Brexit, Donald Trump years, currently pandemics. We have, of course, the geopolitical competition between the United States and China. All these required huge level of European Union's resilience, unity, and functionality. these were the priorities we did not choose for ourselves, but we had to deal with those. And therefore, the enlargement is still there, the commitment is still there, the responsibility is still there, but the passion or the enthusiasm is not. How can we change that? Again, my best advice for the region would be, you need to continue being active and present. You need to make your voice heard. You need to reaffirm your commitment to the European Union and pro-EU policies. Of course, you should align yourself 100% with the European Union common foreign and security policies. If possible, do not join any alliances when you are declaring that your priority is to join the European Union. You, of course, continue with the reforms, because after all, you are doing these reforms for yourself, for your citizens, and they are good regardless of when are you going to join the European Union. You must show that you are reliable partners, because, and you cannot blame European leaders for facing a dilemma when on the one hand you have geopolitics that says very clearly that we need to integrate the region as soon as possible. On the other hand is the question, is their integration going to increase, improve our functionality or not? And you need to give the answer, the positive answer to this question. So yes, there is more skepticism, yes, there is more scrutiny, but the best way to how to alleviate the concerns in the European Union is to deliver on reforms and of course to show results and to show that you share the values 100%. And I'm optimistic that this increased attention will bring to increased action, and in the end, as we are getting out of the COVID quarantine, we will also get out of the enlargement quarantine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now it's time to move to Mr. Christian Schmidt, the member of the German Bundestag and High Representative Designate for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mr. Schmidt, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gordon, for this very impressive and helpful, especially for me now in starting in a new position, information on this conference here. I appreciate it very much, the geostrategic relation High Representative Borrell gave us this morning, as we got the understanding that this is not about the 6 Western Balkan states, but it is about understanding that this is a part of Europe, and we have to try to see that there's the potential area of commitment, cooperation, but as well of influx from other sides is on stake, and that we have to come back on track, come back after the pandemic, and check whether we could make things easier. A German looks first about what has Konrad Adenauer said. And I would like to share with you some comment Adenauer gave when he was asked whether he would see things too easy. He said, I think that's a great praise, because in fact, you have to see things so deeply that they are simple. If you just stay on the surface of things, they are not easy. But when you look in depth, you see the real, and that's always easy. Im Grunde sind die Dinge ganz einfach. Okay, it's not easy to transfer this to the Western Balkans, but I think some key issues are indeed easy. The first is, and has been named and explained from some contributors to this panel, that there needs to be an understanding of internal cooperation and the mood of going together. This will bring us, Europeans, to the answering the question whether this is a step-by-step approach or the Big Bang, all 6 together. I remember very well the times when we had the discussion of enlargement of the European Union, and we had the similar discussion. Remember Viktor Orban just saying, how many years am I 5 years away from membership in European Union? So I think it's a Big Bang necessary, or second, well, bang, however you want it. And this needs first that the obstacles among the countries are faced down. So there can be and will be an assistance. We have heard the huge amounts of money. It's not only about money, but it's about civilian society, and we have to see that the most complicated, not easy situations are in the countries where the ethnic composition is challenging. Challenging as we do not just have the sheer majority-minority issue. We know this from a lot of European countries, and we have dealt with them reasonably well. Sometimes there is an uprising and occurring new challenges, but basically we are able to manage this. If we look to Bosnia-Herzegovina, we see that this is not about minority, majority. This is about three constituent people and the others, where probably today, if we had a look on Dayton, we would have some ideas to draw some articles, draft them in another way or have other options, but it is as it is. And very simply is as well that those who have the fantasy that it would be good to change borders, the fantasy to create new states, I would say it's over. The time we have to commit us on stability and deal with the people like they are. We have not, in heaven, we can invent new mentalities, but we have to deal with it. So the simple issue is for the Europeans, and they're following it, that they have an interest in keeping these 6 countries together. And I'm sure there's issues which have been discussed, and it's complicated to explain why a European Union member country now, after another country renaming its name, just saying, okay, now we have new ideas, this will not be bearing for the future for the next time. My question is whether we should have intermediate levels of more integration. Among them, I've got very much the criticism about mini Schengen. A larger Schengen could be another idea, but it needs all 6 together in economic means and others. But as we have, if we have a situation that we stick to our commitment in Europe of integration and all checks, all chapters, including the new way we're dealing with it. It will take, to be honest, Doris Pack would be more outspoken as I am now, probably, that I heard you recently in Brussels. This will take a long time. And the question is not, are we politicians here, we know all how complicated? No, easy for the people. They want to know, do I have an advantage? Have I safe haven or not? And so I think we have to deal with making it provable. And this starts with vaccine and with COVAX. I agree absolutely that there is a comparative advantage being member or in the European, let me say, integration. This is the first, and the second is that the experiences of Dayton should be used, and this will be one of my tasks to transform and translate them to the belongings and requirements of European integration. But these are executive possibilities, and I think we have to understand that in a kind of toolbox, we should put them together and try to come to a joint understanding in the country of ownership. There, for example, there are the issues of rule of law. We had the PRIPE report from European Union, a very intense and outspoken report So far, we have to check, and I suppose we have not, when we check, we will see we have not yet fulfilled and seeing fulfilled everything. So we have to work on this with all means, and we have to work on the youth, the younger generation. If we have a generation, and the Czech minister referred to it somehow, and if I may take the example, you cannot compare examples in history. But his country and my country, we have had in the 20th century very bad years. German occupation, all the times in the 30s and in the 40s. Then Otsun, and feeling that the people cannot cope with each other. And today we stated 30 years after, with a lot of work on the civil society and in education, it is going better. Reconciliation is on stake. This is the way. And if we would not look on the younger generation, probably this fits not only for Bosnia-Herzegovina, but as well in other potential conflicts in the region, we would fail. And I think if we do, there must be a possibility of intermediate phases to say, okay, there we are, we have success, not just fulfilling every requirements of EU membership, but we do. And last, don't forget the Americans. They have done a lot to the Western Balkans in critical times. Honestly, sometimes a little bit more than Europeans. They needed a longer time to understand what has to be done. And so I'm very happy to see that now US administration, and you referred to it, Gordon, now in the, should I say, post-Trump area, hopefully the post-Trump area and not a pre-Trump area, that we have a basis of joint values, but of joint commitment on political level to somehow to safeguard the stability and the development of the region. This should be put on the agenda. Somebody said to me, if I said we have to put Bosnia-Herzegovina very on top of the agenda. He said, be aware. If Bosnia-Herzegovina is on top of the agenda, this is about crisis, and this is about news which we do not want to have. I understand, that's right. But we have to put it on the political agenda, which it has been lost momentum in the recent years. Now it's the way to bring it back again. And if we all contribute, I think there's a good opportunity to have success in the next years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Schmidt. And now we'll move to Mr. Josip Brkić, Deputy Prime Minister of Foreign Affairs. Please, Mr. Brkić.
Thank you very much, and gratitude for the excellent organization here in Dubrovnik, to you, Gordon, and all of your staff from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Equally, I'm also extending our appreciation for, once again, putting the light on the political structural dialogue between the European Union and the Western Balkans during the Croatian presidency last year. Unfortunately, it was on the web format, but what is really cheersome that during the Slovenian presidency in October this year, we could have a chance to once again sit together and have this structured dialogue. Because for us from the Western Balkans or Southeast Europe, of course, countries who are not even still the candidate country, it is rather strange that there is a EU, India, a regular and intensified dialogue, and without regular and intensified dialogue between the Southeast Europe and the European Union. The common future in unified Europe is a message given to us 18 long years since the Thessaloniki summit have passed. So, and it took us under the Greek presidency of the EU. When our region was put on the accession agenda of the EU. Since then, very limited progress has been made, and West Balkan 6 are still far away from the EU club. criteria defined in the new methodology is even more demanding, making the process more complicated. Even the front runners of the region, the progress they have made since 2012, when the accession negotiations were launched, could not anticipate tentatively when it could be concluded. EU member states, amid the discussion about the future of the Union, could not pay much attention to the enlargement process as such. If we add the fact that the enlargement is not so popular topic in most EU countries, becoming especially sensitive during the pre-election campaign, it is obvious that the West Balkan 6 accession is on the remote and on hold. EU failure to open on time the negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania represent another setback. Famous expression, when you deliver, EU will respond immediately. Something that I have heard so many times in past 20 years is proven to be false. North Macedonia made 3 years ago a painful concession regarding the country name, but so far nothing has developed about its EU negotiation status. This is not the blame game, but this is joint responsibility on both sides of the equation, because we all from the region do not have the alternative for the EU integration of the entire region. The alternative we are living right now. This is a waiting room or the quarantine which is taking for so long. My country, Bosnia and Herzegovina, expects to acquire the EU candidate status, but the full membership to the EU is somewhere in the unforeseeable future. In order to open the negotiations between the EU, we have 14 key priorities set in front of the Bosnia and Herzegovina to fulfill them in order to open the negotiations. Candidacy status is somewhat of the political decision which the Council can make at any time. One of the 14 key priorities in front of the Bosnia and Herzegovina, among others, and they are all in equal standing, is to close the office of the High Representative in my country. Yet we are just having a dear friend, newly appointed High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina, and imagine how much time it's going to need, which I don't have any doubts that it is a top agenda of Mr. Schmidt to close the OHR as soon as 5+2 conditionalities. That's great news we have, so it's not going to be 20 years. Someone said we were waiting for 30, if it's another 10, this Minister Bujar, then it's fine, as long as we have the end date. So it's important to bear this also in mind. Questioning, are our West Balkan 6 countries in such a bad shape at the beginning of the EU accession process in 2003 at the Thessaloniki summit in comparison with some countries that became members during the first decade of the 21st century when they started to approach the EU? Do we really need twice or 3 times longer preparation than they had? Do we need another 18 or even more years to become a full members of the EU? I was thinking that this is responsibility of one generation, but it seems like that this is a multi-generational endeavor. And all the time, we have another positive examples of the integration of the countries of the Western Balkans into the other organizations. It was underlined here that the United States are playing very important and key role in this region. Is this the reason why we have 3-1 results when it comes to the integration of some of the West Balkan countries into the NATO, and we don't succeed into the EU? I refuse to believe that the values promoted by the NATO are of somewhat different than the values which are promoted by the European Union as such. There are some tangible progress which is made in the region, in the level of the regional cooperation. But be assured that we would like to be integrated into the European Union and not to have the regional integration, but all the level of the regional cooperation necessary in order to have better life for all the citizens in the region. You rightly pointed out that Bosnia and Herzegovina sooner or later is going to become a topic of the discussion with the EU and US counterparts, which is, as we speak today, partners who are helping us to limitly change the constitution in Bosnia and Herzegovina and try to have as fair, honest, and integral electoral system in Bosnia and Herzegovina, allowing every citizen to participate in the process, at the same time hoping to have protected rights of all three constitutive people, as you rightly pointed out, as it is, embedded into the Dayton peace agreement. We would like this process to end as fast as possible so that we can call ourselves citizens of the European Union, because today we are equally Europeans in cultural, historical, social, whatever sense as the colleagues from the European Union, but what we are lacking is this being a part of the institutionalized Europe, part of the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we can move to our last speaker at the introduction, Mr. Nemanja Starović, the State Secretary. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Since the time we are left is not abundant, I will try to be brief and cut to the point and name the three issues that I think that are very important and that arise from the introduction to this very panel. But also, since it is always very good to start from the positive angle, I'm just looking at this slogan of this forum, together in a world apart, and I think it very well describes some of the things that we have achieved in the Western Balkans region in the last 16 or 17 months, despite very dire circumstances and pandemics that we have been facing and still facing, of course. I mean, contrary to the expectations of the many, we in the Western Balkans have achieved something. We have shown much more solidarity, I think, than our friends in other parts of the continent. Many figures, many numbers were mentioned today, and I usually like to go beyond the sheer numbers, but I will also mention a few of them. We in the Republic of Serbia, we were a little bit more successful in early procurement of the vaccines, but that is the reason that we try to help our neighbors, of course. And from the very start, we started donating those vaccines to our neighbors who had none at the moment. Situation improved, of course, but as of today, I think it is almost 250,000 vaccines that we donated to our neighbors. Then we opened our borders for the citizens of the regions, and not just of the region, to come and have their free vaccines in our country. And almost 200,000 of our neighbors came and got their vaccines. We included the migrant population in the vaccination program, donated, I think, 100,000 dosages to our friends from the Czech Republic, and now we are preparing a very large batch of vaccines for countries of the African continent who have been hit the hardest. But, when we go beyond the sheer numbers, I think we also had one very important added value to all of this. And I will give you an example. The moment when we opened our borders and people started flocking to Belgrade, and other Serbian cities, I've seen many short interviews of those people coming to Belgrade. And I've heard people, for example, from Sarajevo, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, who came to Belgrade actually to get their vaccines, to preserve their health. And they said that is the first time for the full 30 years they came to Belgrade, after full 30 years. And, they were really surprised and amazed to see how much Serbia has changed and how welcome they were, of course. to come to our capital. And that mental image of Serbia of the 90s just melted down in one day. So I think that is that added value in reconciliation process is something that is that we must cherish, and I think that is something we must sustain in the following months and years, even when this pandemics will be over, and I hope it will be soon, of course. The second point about the reform processes in the Western Balkans and the EU accession, well, I think we know what we have to do. I think the playing field has been set. We know the criteria. They are hard. They are very demanding, but we are not complaining about that, of course, because we know that in the end, everything that we are asked to do is beneficial for our own citizens. But as we are mentioned, I think it is also very important, you know, to be honest and to be credible. And we speak about honesty. I think that we cannot jump over the elephant in the room, you know, and we must admit that when we speak about the enlargement of the European Union, there was always a very strong political dimension. And the way that it was before the Big Bang enlargement, it was also afterwards. And the way it is manifested today, in present, is through this phenomenon of the so-called enlargement fatigue, you know. And I think it is good to be honest and to honestly speak about that and find the ways how we can all together, our European Union partners and we in the Western Balkans, how we can face that and how we can deal with that. It is better than to hide behind some bilateral issues and blockades that are being set. And of course, I do think about our friends and neighbors in North Macedonia. And I must say one more thing, that this blockade that they are facing, it is not just a problem for Skopje and our friends in North Macedonia. It is something that really very strongly resonates throughout the region. And that is a very, very wrong message that we are all receiving. If there is a country in the region that did everything possible and even more, some of the things that seemed impossible, that is North Macedonia. And what happened in the end? Actually nothing. Very wrong message, and I hope that we will have progress in that regard very, very soon. And when we mention that so-called enlargement fatigue, there is a flip side to the same coin, and that is the accession fatigue, and that is something that we must deal in the region and that we are dealing on a daily basis. Sometimes I'm delighted to see that despite such a long time that our enlargement and accession is taking, that despite all of that, we still have overall support in our society in Serbia for the membership in the EU. Miroslav mentioned the Thessaloniki summit. We all remember Thessaloniki summit and pledges and commitments given. But you know, the baby that was born during the Thessaloniki summit today is a full-grown adult of 18 years with full voting rights. And that is something we must also keep in mind. And the third point about the demographic issues and outflow of people and the phenomenon of the so-called brain drain. It is common for all of us in the region, no doubt about that. But I will tell you something that may be a novelty for many of you present here. Actually, according to data that we are having, and that is supported by the service of the Vienna Institute for Economic Studies, actually the brain drain in Serbia is already trumped by brain gain. What I wanted to say that more people with tertiary degrees are coming to Serbia as of now than people with tertiary degrees leaving. Many reasons for that. Our students coming back to Serbia, students from the region coming to our universities and staying after that in Serbia, and then full-grown professionals seeking their job opportunities in our country. But what we are facing, it's a very, very dangerous thing, is something that I may call a muscle drain. People with secondary degrees, people proficient in the crafts and trades, going to European Union countries, mainly to Germany. What is the reason for that? Well, you know, unlike professionals in IT or creative industry, our plumbers, our carpenters, our welders, they cannot work online for their German employers. They need to go there. And the only answer to that, having in mind some experiences of our friends from countries like Poland, like Lithuania, and so on, is economic development. The moment that we converge in economical terms with the European Union, at least to a certain extent, then the outflow will slowly stop. And way we can do it, and the way we can answer to all these three issues I mentioned, of course, is the regional economic integration. I have no doubt about that, and all you know that our flagship initiative is called Mini Schengen. We started that, Republic of Serbia, North Macedonia, and Albania. And it is a fully inclusive process, open for all the Western Balkan partners. And it is definitely not a substitute for the European Union integration, but something that is complementary and that we can do in parallel without waiting for some other things to happen. We can try to integrate among ourselves. I will give you also one information that we were provided by a study done by the World Bank, saying that if we establish the common space in the Western Balkans for the free flow of people, goods, capital, and services, we would be able to produce 3.5 billion euros of added value each year, altogether. We're not speaking about money that will come as a support, help, and we are appreciative for all the help that we're getting, especially from the European Union. But it is the money and the value that we can produce ourselves. So it's that in mind, I was very surprised by some of the things that I have heard at the beginning of this panel. And I must clarify that, Belgrade, Skopje, and Tirana started the initiative, but it is fully open to our friends from Bosnia and Herzegovina, from Montenegro, and also for our southern province of Kosovo and Metohija. And on top of that, just 10 months ago, in September last year, Pristina committed to join the mini Schengen initiative in line with the Washington Agreement. But that is their right to join or not to join. And I am sure that the time will prove all the value of this initiative. And if the problem is just in a name of mini Schengen, well, I can inform you that in 2 weeks we will change that name. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. We practically run out of time, but we have to make the time for a couple of questions. I would like to ask you, Mr. Lajčák, you did mention economic part of the recovery for the Western Balkans, which is important, obviously, economic and investment plan. But we've seen within this discussion that there are also political issues that have been raised that have to do with economic. So now we have basically two schools of doing it. Either we firstly resolve political problems, issues, and then move to economy, or the vice versa. Or we do it hand in hand. I mean, what is the way out from this discussion that we witnessed today?
Clearly, there are political issues that prevent the region from fast European integration, but sometimes in our discussions we are too much focused on these issues, on the obstacles on the political side, and that's why I feel compelled to remind ourselves of the huge activities that are happening on the economic front. They will not solve our political dilemmas, but they are clearly showing that the European Union is counting on future membership. European Union is preparing these countries for future membership. European Union is building all the connections, the physical but also human, with the region. So the region is clearly embedded into European system, European norms, European values, but also European infrastructure. And this is sometimes overlooked or neglected or taken for granted. Should not be. But at the same time, obviously, we need to overcome the legacy of the past. Because, as I mentioned, the functionality, it is a reality. The region and every member of the region must demonstrate that with their membership, European Union will become stronger and better functioning. And this impulse must come from the region. The European Union is ready to respond positively, but we need to have absolutely no doubts that we will be stronger with the Western Balkans among our membership.
Thank you. I would like to ask Mr. Schmidt and Madam Zovko the question on Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mr. Schmidt, how do you see the perspectives now for the country? And do you see there is you have raised the question of the basically the civic state and the three constitutional rights for the people in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Do you see that it can go hand in hand, or is it really confrontational in a political sense? What is your opinion on that? And secondly, you did mention the role of the US in the peace process. How do you see this role in the future for the moment to come for Bosnia and Herzegovina?
Thank you. First, to question 2, very constructive and indispensable, especially in a situation where, unfortunately, we see that one of the Dayton signatory states, the Russian Federation, does not stick to its political and constitutional commitments in this context. So the second is, as my neighbor has pointed on, I do not see that the constitution as it is today would answer all questions, including the issue we have with Finci and not only, and other court decisions about this. But basically, I'm optimistic. You cannot be pessimistic if you're starting a position. But I think there has a lot to be done, and the pressure could come to everybody, because it cannot be that Bosnia-Herzegovina stays behind in terms of EU access. So this is the best argument, I think the pragmatic argument, that we have to work on this jointly in Europe, in Bosnia-Herzegovina. That's complicated, but I rely a little bit on the sheer understanding that there is a need to do this. And if we manage that this is beyond ideological or national-oriented positions, we will succeed.
Thank you. Madam Zovko.
Thank you for the question. I think it's the most difficult one that we've got. But we have been dealing with the Brexit, and we are still dealing with the consequences of the Brexit and the withdrawal agreement and Northern Irish issue. And I would invite all the ministers that are present here to follow the Protestant marching season in Northern Ireland. So if we couldn't get rid of identity issue in Northern Ireland, where all these EU citizens are living and we take care of them and their safety, security, and also of not having a hard burden with Northern Ireland, I think we should also pay respect to what is happening in Bosnia and Herzegovina and all the region. I mentioned the Ohrid agreement that made this fine balance between Albanian community and Macedonian community that combined this civic and constitutional model, but it's not called constitutional, it's the ethnic model. We have the case of Kosovo, when the Bosniak member was elected by a Serb majority, and this was annulled by the Constitutional Court immediately. And I salute this decision, because it was not a true representative of Bosniak community. But what we are having since 2006 in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we are having one member of the presidency being elected by Bosniak majority and without true representative of Croats community. And that really made Croat in a bad position, and Croatian state, to be like this annoying member of European Union, to warn that this is not good. So combining civic and ethnic model has been offered in 2015 by International Crisis Group as an exit strategy for Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we have it in 3 electoral units. This was offered during the Madame Pack as a rapporteur for Bosnia and Herzegovina, as a federalism, as the only middle way between 2 extremes, unitarism and separatism. So how are we going to achieve this model where you can combine Sejdić-Finci solution together with constitutional ethnic rights? It's very easy. It's just suffice to not to be I don't know how to say, too emotional, too sentimental, but to say you cannot break peace agreement because you are pushing the other parts towards these actors that are really dangerous, Russia and Turkey, and even China. This fine balance has to come through federalism, and it was said even in a Amato report, I mean, no one has read the IPA III report, but Goran Svilanovic told me the solution was there. Lagumdžija said, you need third federal unit. But no one speaks about that. In 2005, in ICG report, they said the multi-ethnic football club is Zrinski in Mostar. I mean, in Belfast, you cannot have Catholics and Protestants together, or even in Glasgow today they are together. But in Zrinski, you have a Muslim, Bosniak Serbs and Croats playing for a Croat club. So you have this federalism in effect, but you cannot translate it. So we have a Mostar Agreement, which was easily done by American administration and the European administration who understood the sensitivity of this town. But we are having all these idealistic approaches that something can be resolved with, with giving majority just to rule over. But as I warned you in the beginning, this has really created the chaos. This cannot work in Western Balkan. This we know from Macedonia, North Macedonia, and from the cases in the rest of the Western Balkan. So follow ICG report, follow American finding at that time, and we will find a solution.
Thank you very much. We would have to now conclude this panel. Thank all the speakers. I thank all the speakers. If there's something that can be said by, that was said by many of you that some of the most difficult things can be easy. If what Mr. Lajčák said, we need a passion and enthusiasm. For sure, our speakers had passion and enthusiasm in talking to us today. So I would suggest we give them a round of applause for their effort. Thank you once more, and hope to see you next year in Dubrovnik. Thank you.